The Cuyahoga County Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, April the 14th, 2015 is called to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Ms. Conwell. Ms. Conwell is absent at the moment. Mr. Jones.
Here.
Ms. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Hairston.
Here.
Ms. Simon.
Here.
Mr. Greenspan. Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Germana.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Gallagher is absent at the moment. Mr. Strawn.
Here.
And Council President Brady.
Here.
There is a quorum.
Thank you. Is there any public comment related to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. President. C. Ellen Conley would like to address council.
Sounds somewhat familiar.
Please let the record reflect that Mr. Gallagher is in attendance.
Back on you.
Good afternoon, I like that, Jack.
Oh, I like you.
I'm here on behalf of Mark Griffin.
Hold on, Ellen.
How soon we forget? I'm here on behalf of Mark Griffin for the position of Inspector General. As many of you know, I've been a longtime friend and unpaid research assistant for his father, the retired Judge Burt Griffin, who served as a staff member of the Warren Commission. It has been my pleasure to do research. I've now moved up to doing PowerPoints for him and also chauffeuring him to the airport. But it has been a pleasure to learn so much firsthand history from him. As a result, I've known Mark and his entire family for many years. Mark Griffin has a very, very impressive resume. His academic credentials are outstanding. He has a background that includes serving at the Peace Corps, in the Peace Corps. In fact, I remember when his dad took a trip to the Camerons to visit him and came back and told all about it. He's worked as a research assistant for the House of Commons. He's engaged in the practice of law. This wide experience will be of great value to this Office of Inspector General and for the county. His type of background will has demonstrated a great desire to be involved in public service, and this is exactly what this office needs. As all of you know, I voted for the original legislation that created the Office of Inspector General, but over the last 4 years, questions have arisen. I believe that we are in need of fine-tuning that office in its operation and scope, and Mark will do an excellent job in doing that. I was very impressed with his decision not to take this position until he was confirmed, and I think that shows his knowledge of public administration. It's certainly a pleasure to be in the reverse role today, to speak to you, rather as a presenter rather than a questioner, and it is my pleasure once again to support the confirmation of Mark Griffin.
Thank you, Judge Conley.
Thank you.
The fourth item, items referred to committee, confirmation hearings. Welcome to the confirmation hearings at which council will consider the appointment of Dennis Kennedy as fiscal officer and Mark Griffin as Inspector General of Cuyahoga County. For a little background, the fiscal department was originally established in 2011 and merged with the offices of the former county auditor, recorder, and the auto title division of the clerk of courts. Fiscal officer must be a certified public accountant and must have at least 5 years' experience in the management of financial matters of political subdivisions. It is our understanding that Mr. Kennedy is currently serving as the interim fiscal officer and will be made permanent upon council's confirmation. The hearings will proceed as we have in the past. The nominees will be offered an opportunity to address their qualifications, motivations for seeking the office, and outlooks and plans regarding the office. Council members will then be offered the opportunity to ask questions of the nominee. We will do so in rounds, allowing each council member to ask 2 questions per round until all council questions have been answered. Once all questions have been asked, we will entertain a motion to recommend that council approve or reject the nomination. At the next regular meeting, if we are not ready to act on that motion today, we will defer making the recommendation. Assuming a motion to recommend approval or rejection has been made, council will vote on that recommendation at its next regular meeting. Thank you, and let's begin. Mr. Kennedy.
Mr. President, if I may read the item
Yes.
into the record, thank you. Resolution number 2015-0058, a resolution confirming the county executive's appointment of Dennis G. Kennedy upon his taking the oath of office as fiscal officer of Cuyahoga County and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. Mr. President, members of the Cuyahoga County Council, good afternoon. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to review both my relevant experience and interests pertinent to my candidacy for the position of fiscal officer for Cuyahoga County. I would also like to express my appreciation to the county executive, members of his administrative staff for their recommendation and support of my candidacy. I'd like to structure my remarks today in 4 major categories. First, I'd like to briefly review my education and work history for you to assure you that I possess the necessary qualifications for the position of fiscal officer as outlined in Section 5.02 of the county charter. Second, I'd like to have a review of the major areas of responsibility associated with the position of fiscal officer for Cuyahoga County. Third, a brief summary of my assessment of county fiscal operations accumulated during my first 2 weeks in the position on an interim capacity. And fourth and last, a discussion why I decided to pursue this position and some of the reasons why I believe I can carry out its duties and responsibilities to the level of excellence that is expected by both the executive and the county council. A little background on myself. I was born in Cuyahoga County and grew up on the east side of Cleveland. With the exception of a few years I lived in Lake County after I was married in 1980. I have resided in Cuyahoga County exclusively. Presently, I'm a resident of South Euclid, where I've lived since 1987. I attended St. Joseph High School in Cleveland and eventually completed my college experience at Cleveland State University. My initial introduction to government service began in 1976 when I obtained an intern position at the Ohio Lottery Commission. The agency was in its infancy then, beginning operations in 1974 after a successful ballot initiative in 1973. Through a series of good fortune and hard work, I progressed through various part-time and full-time positions at the lottery. I was moved into intern and part-time positions in the fiscal office of the lottery and held positions as an entry-level accountant, upper-level accountant, a budget officer, a fiscal officer, and ultimately I was made the deputy director of finance. While serving in various capacities at the lottery, I attended Cleveland State on a part-time basis. I eventually became eligible for the agency's tuition reimbursement program and completed the final pieces of my college requirements, which resulted in obtaining a bachelor's of business administration with a major in accounting in 1985. Subject to my graduation from CSU, I pursued my ultimate goal of passing the required test for a license as a certified public accountant. I was successful in qualifying for licensing and received my CPA. For your review, I have attached documentation to my resume that supports the validity of my active license as a CPA in the state of Ohio. As I've stated, I continued to move through the ranks of financial operations at the lottery through the early part of 1996. I watched the agency grow and held various positions of important financial responsibility in an agency that expanded its sales well beyond $1 billion a year by 1996. I had primary responsibility for oversight of all the agency's finance and its operational budgets at that point, which were well into the $300 million range. And I also served as the manager of all our annual audits conducted by or on behalf of the Auditor of State. During the period in the finance department of the lottery where I had responsibility for financial operations and audits, the agency received all clean opinions from the state auditor. One of the standards that I've set for all financial areas of operations that I've worked with was to quickly implement any recommendations or changes suggested by the auditor in the annual management letters issued to the agency or any communities in which I've worked. I've continued to use that approach with respect to audit comments and recommendations everywhere I've served since then, and I plan on doing that in this capacity as well. In 1996, I was asked to submit a resume to the City of Beechwood for the position of Finance Director. The city had just come off a tumultuous series of events which resulted in criminal charges being pursued for the mayor, the finance director, service director, and several other officials of the city. The council president at that point assumed the role of mayor in accordance with the succession plans laid out in the city charter, and was looking to put together a team to straighten out city operations and implement changes mandated by the state auditor as a result of their investigation to improve internal controls and eliminate the probability of any future fraudulent activities. When I arrived in Beechwood, the city was 2 years behind on filing financial reports with the state and had no centralized accounting system. Additionally, income tax administration was lagging unreasonably behind, and the city had no formal direction established with respect to record retention. With the support of the new mayor and council, I was able to direct programs where the city's financial statements were made current. A new accounting system was installed and implemented. Income tax administration was outsourced and associated backlogs were eliminated, and a records management program was put in place to microfilm hordes of city documents that accumulated for years and had begun to overrun City Hall. I was employed in Beechwood for a bit over 3 years when I received a call from the new governor's chief of staff to determine my level of interest in returning to the Ohio Lottery. In the 3 years I had been gone from the agency, a series of policy and direction changes had resulted in a negative impact to the agency's financial position and its mission to generate funds for education. While I enjoyed my tenure at Beechwood, I did decide to accept an opportunity to return to the lottery, first as the assistant director, and shortly thereafter I was appointed director by Governor Taft and confirmed by the Ohio Senate. I remained at the lottery from 1999 through the end of 2004. I was charged with the responsibility by the governor of increasing sales and profits and pursuing operational improvements and efficiencies to change the culture of the agency and its future direction. I'm pleased with the performance of the agency during my time as director, as we were successful in increasing annual sales and profits to levels not seen in a number of years. We had worked to improve the functionality of our day-to-day operations, implementing a number of administrative programs designed to restructure contracts and reduce our workforce. These programs were successful in the lottery, achieving lower operating expenses, which allowed for a rededication of funding to sales efforts that produced even higher profit levels. As was the case in my previous service at the lottery, we received clean audits and implemented corrective actions as recommended by the annual audits conducted by the Auditor of State. Subsequent to leaving the lottery, I took a position with a private entity in the gambling industry. I had hopes of successfully designing lottery games for other jurisdictions, and the company agreed to support my efforts in that regard while using my assistance to promote internet gaming ventures they had created. Although I thought I had several quality game designs that would be successful, I was not able to obtain a contract with the lottery to do so. Additionally, changes in federal law rendered domestic internet gaming virtually illegal, which eliminated sales potential for this company. My contract terminated in the summer of 2007, and the company and I went in different directions. Shortly thereafter, I received a call asking if I would be interested in speaking with the mayor of the city of Brooklyn. The finance director in that community had recently departed, and the mayor needed to fill that position with an experienced person in an expeditious manner. After meeting with the mayor, law director, and former finance director, the mayor made me an offer to take the position, and I was subsequently approved by council. While I had originally envisioned only being in Brooklyn a short while, the circumstances of the economic downturn created some havoc with the finances of the city, and I stayed on board to see things through. My tenure in Brooklyn was complicated a little beyond the devastation of the recession due to the fact that the sitting mayor was forced to resign after some criminal and civil legal issues. As in Beechwood, the then council president became the mayor per the charter and was forced to deal with the administrative issues that could not be postponed any longer. The situation in Brooklyn was tenuous, with our general fund balance dropping to levels approximating $20,000. Concurrently, we have been notified that the city's largest employer was contemplating moving to another community with a potential disastrous effect on city revenue. With the help of the mayor and the council, we were able to implement some strategic changes to the budget that helped alleviate the immediate impact on operations. Layoffs, furloughs, and capital financing reduced the strain on the general fund. I also recommended the creation of a rainy day fund for the city as allowed by the Ohio Revised Code in an effort to begin saving some funds for the day when a large business would exit the community. I'm happy to say that the combined efforts of council and the administration have paid off in Brooklyn, as their general fund balance is now somewhere in the vicinity of $10 million. The general fund balance was nearly $7 million when I left in 2011, and the rainy day fund had accumulated substantial resources that were now formally reserved. Another of my accomplishments in Brooklyn was the creation and adoption of a city fraud policy. At the time the policy was approved by council, Brooklyn was one of the few communities in the state of Ohio to have a fraud policy officially recorded on the books. And again, in Brooklyn, we received clean audits from the state auditor and worked hard to address any comments and recommendations contained in the management letters. Before I left Brooklyn, I was asked by the state auditor to serve on the Northeast Ohio Regional Advisory Committee to help lend assistance from a municipal perspective to the various programs offered by the Auditor of State. In 2011, I was contacted by the Human Resource Director of the City of Solon to determine my level of interest in the position of Finance Director, a vacancy created by retirement of a longtime employee of that community. I interviewed with a hiring committee in Solon, ultimately accepted an offer to assume the role of Finance Director for the city. For the first 3 months of my tenure in Solon, I also doubled as the Finance Director in Brooklyn until a replacement could be hired after a mayoral election. So beginning in January 2012, I was finished with my duties in Brooklyn and focused my full-time commitment on my work in Solon. I spent 3.5 great years in Solon, working on streamlining the reporting process and implementing various financial policies designed to better communicate the financial position of the city to the administration and to council. Like Brooklyn, I also introduced a formal fraud policy to the city, which was adopted shortly after my arrival. During 2012 to 2014, again in Solon, we received clean opinions from the auditor and pursued improvements to purchasing policies, investment policies, and cost efficiencies. Also, as in Brooklyn, I recommended adoption of a formal rainy day fund to support emergency expenses in times of severe revenue disruptions. That fund will have over $5 million in it by the end of 2015 for the city of Solon. I was contacted in January this year to gauge my interest in assuming the position of fiscal officer for Cuyahoga County. While I had respectably declined this opportunity 4 years ago, I felt that I could contribute to the new government at this point in time and was excited about the prospect of taking on a new challenge with a new county executive and a growing government. In summary, I believe that my 10+ years in positions as finance director of 3 local Northeast Ohio suburbs, my prior financial and management experience at the Ohio Lottery, and my license as a certified public accountant fully satisfy the requirements of the county charter with respect to the position of fiscal officer. My experience in municipal and state government has also provided me with a strong background in negotiating and administering collective bargaining agreements, an issue I know is expanding as of late in the county government. I also believe my experience provides evidence of how I work with the legislative bodies in a spirit of cooperation and partnership to provide the most accurate level of financial reporting and guidance that I am capable of. I'm sure if you contact council members in Solon and Brooklyn that I've recently worked with, I am positive they will corroborate my assessment and confirm that I worked in a completely collaborative effort in carrying out my duties as finance director in those communities. As structured currently, the fiscal officer has responsibility over the former offices of the auditor and the recorder, consumer affairs, accounting and financial reporting, records retention, the primary customer call center, the board of revision, purchasing and procurement, auto title processing, budget management, and special projects. Additionally, the position heads up the County Audit Committee and works closely with the Treasurer's Office. While the current configuration of the organizational chart may evolve into something different in the future, I'm attempting to gain as much information about things as they exist today to make an accurate assessment of what changes can be made to improve our efficiencies, controls, and the compilation and dissemination of accurate financial information. My initial introduction to the position of fiscal officer is to familiarize myself with the department composition, staffing levels, the various financial and accounting systems that are employed by the staff throughout the building, and other areas as necessary. Although I've had just a limited opportunity to delve into the details of most of the areas supervised by the fiscal officer, there are a few items of note that I would like to make reference to. I would hope to be afforded the chance to examine the operations of the fiscal office more in depth to determine how to suggest improvements that will make our work more efficient and effective. So you're aware, I have also met with representatives of the State Auditor's Office to discuss the results of the 2013 audit in an effort to gain a firmer insight into their findings and recommendations. Additionally, I've had several meetings with the county's internal auditor to discuss her concerns and recommendations relative to performance improvement measures. Based on a little more than 2 weeks on board in my interim capacity, I can identify several major areas where specific attention should be addressed by the fiscal officer to promote progress. First, the current EAP project is a priority. The current financial systems for accounting, purchasing, budgeting, and various other ancillary processes are outdated and inefficient. Further, these systems do not communicate with each other, which increases the potential for errors in merging data, as well as leaving gaps in the information process related to timing issues. While expensive, the EAP implementation is an absolute necessity to both reduce annual operating costs and to allow for production of accurate financial and budget information on a timely basis that can be relied upon to be used by the administration and council to make informed and responsible financial decisions. Secondly, efforts are underway to complete the triennial update scheduled for this summer. I plan on making a priority of completely understanding the logic and statistical components of this compilation. We must exercise extreme diligence during the formation of the recommendations that result from this process, as the implications, impact, and importance of the project cannot be understated from the perspective of our political subdivision partners throughout the county. Third, I believe the limitations of the current financial systems provide some problems with our level of reporting capabilities. I believe there are alternative reporting models we could develop, even in advance of the ERP completion, that can more accurately represent financial and budget information to council and to the general public. Along those lines, I would like to evaluate some different accounting mechanisms, such as the creation of new funds or sub-funds that may alleviate some of the interpretive issues that seem to be a pitfall of the end products of the current budget reports. Some other changes to how some costs are allocated or provided for in reserves could be accounted for differently in a manner that fosters a cleaner understanding of the county's financial picture. Lastly, the composition of the workforce in various departments within the fiscal office needs to be evaluated thoroughly. The demographics of the staff are such that there is a disproportionate number of employees who are eligible for retirement or will be very soon. These employees possess a vast level of institutional knowledge, which, coupled with individual intricacies of the various systems currently being used, to create a recipe for gaps in productive capabilities. Although the ERP project should mitigate some of the problems related to the legacy systems the county currently uses, I believe it is imperative to integrate some new staff into various functions within the fiscal office to provide the proper level of support for a protected succession plan, so we may avoid losing large amounts of historical knowledge and also prevent artificially empowering staff who possess specific tools that are not shared in general throughout the office or the department. To close, I'd like to ensure that everyone on council is aware of my level of commitment and excitement for this position. I had a very good position in Solon, working in a wonderful community with great leadership and an excellent staff. The easy thing for me to do would have been to stay in Solon, enjoy the benefits of running the financial operations for a community with no short-term negative financial expectations. After meeting with Mr. Budish earlier this year, I was extremely interested in his vision for moving Cuyahoga County forward over the course of the next 4 years. After much thought, I decided that I would like to be a part of the county and the continued growth, and I was now in a position in my life to dedicate the necessary time and attention to the position of fiscal officer. I can assure everyone on council that I share the county executive's conservative fiscal policy and will do my utmost to provide the council, the administration, and the constituents of Cuyahoga County with clear and understandable financial reporting and accounting, and demand that the staff within the office carry out their duties with the highest possible level of customer service, dedication, and diligence. In closing, I would like to thank you for your time and the opportunity to address you this afternoon. Truly hope I have presented you with sufficient evidence of my qualifications for the position and have demonstrated my commitment and interest to achieving success in continuing the improvements being made in Cuyahoga County government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Now, this is a very big job, and we're going to go to questioning now by the council. We'll see who's up first here. Okay. Mr. Councilman Schron, then Councilman Miller.
Thank you. And congratulations on your nomination, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, sir.
You alluded to the ERP system. Sometimes you call it EAP, ERP. What is your experience in installing a system-wide ERP system into an organization of this size?
Mr. President, Mr. Schron, I can say that I don't have any direct experience with implementation of a system in an organization on this side. I was involved from an agency standpoint when I was with the state of Ohio with the state's ERP program, which is the OAK system. That was starting to be developed basically towards the end of my tenure at the lottery. So I was involved in a lot of planning with that, mostly from our end at the agency. I do have a lot of experience in terms of implementing systems throughout either an agency or a city, but would have to say no specific experience in that capacity. In
installing an ERP system? You have no specific experience, though, what I understood?
Correct.
Of the actual install. You also, on the follow-on then, also alluded, I think maybe with a positive and a negative component to it, as far as experienced personnel, as to the potential of losing them, but by the same token, I think maybe even alluded, maybe I'm reading into it, as to the impact that sometimes those who are set in their ways, maybe and perhaps having been around ERP systems, can have some difficulty in installing in that. Have you given any thought as to what you want to do? Because that day of reckoning of installing this is going to be a massive project, and how that would impact the longevity and the personnel that you're looking to have on your staff.
Mr. Schron, I have given some thought to it. I mean, I'm trying to get up to speed really on all the technical aspects of the project. In terms of the staffing, it's probably a twofold kind of issue. The staffing right now, there's a lot of experienced people here, and I will say for the record that things here are much better than I thought they would be, really, honestly, from looking at it from the outside, from a municipal standpoint. Very impressed with the level of work and commitment of the folks here. The problem that you run from a staffing standpoint is there's a lot of people that have been here 25, 28, 30 plus years, that there really isn't any kind of succession plan for people to fill in their positions. And because of all these little individual pocket legacy systems, everybody knows a little bits or a piece that the other people don't know about. And you really elevate your risk in terms of a productivity or performance drop-off if we don't get some people on the back end to come in and start training to fill those positions upper level. As far as coordinating with the ERP, we need to communicate to the staff the benefits of what we're attempting to do. I think a lot of time buy-in from employees isn't received to the extent that it should be because the employees are never told what the ultimate goal is or what the objective is. They're just told bits and pieces of what to do. So we're going to really need to get folks here engaged in that process, show them the benefit of integrating an HR system and a purchasing system, an accounting system, and a budget system, so that we're all not doing independent work that never seems to get melded together.
That was my two questions. My comment would be on exactly your point there, that if somebody is in the sunset portion of their career, the resistance sometimes on an ERP system, if it's going to take a 2-year or 3-year process to put it in place, you don't get that buy-in. So just be mindful of of that aspect of what you have to do to undertake this project.
Thank you.
Councilman Miller.
Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Kennedy, first of all, congratulations on your recommendation for appointment. It appears to me that you have a combination of a high regard for the positive work that's been done so far in your department, combined with a history of being able to take systems and move them in a positive direction. So I think that's a good combination.
Thank you.
My first question is a broad one as to what is your assessment of the county's current financial condition, and are there ways in which you believe that the county should handle its finances differently?
Mr. President, Councilman Miller, I've only been here 2 weeks, so I've been stretched in a few different directions. I would like the opportunity to put together my own projections and my own compilations. Right now I'm relying, basically the last audit period was 2013, so 2014 data hasn't been through any kind of review or adjustment by the auditors. For my initial 30,000 foot flyover, I probably, as with most governmental entities, I think it depends on the long-term needs and the direction the county's going to go in. I think short-term, day-to-day operations can be funded sufficiently. I'm not completely aware of all the projects. I hear of some things. I've never really got a list of prospective projects. So I would like the opportunity to have a little more time to look into that. As far as communicating the information, I will admit that the reports are a little bit confusing. I think that's a limitation of the software that's being used, some of it from the early 90s, maybe even earlier. It's, the folks here are kind of limited or hamstrung in terms of the capabilities of what those systems are. I mean, I personally haven't seen anything like that in 20 years. So I think there's some things we can do even in advance of the ERP system being put in place, because that's going to take several years, obviously. But we can create some peripheral systems that can communicate the information a little better to everybody internally, to the executive, to the council. I'd like to make the information transfer as smooth as possible. I never believe in giving somebody a report and then telling them that there's a list of 10 or 12 things that they have to remember, because that number that they're seeing isn't really the number. I want the number that I give to people to be the number, so everybody can make decisions on those. I don't know if that quite answers.
Okay. My second question is as to whether you've reviewed Chapter 701 of the county code, which refers to the the financial reporting requirements to council, and if you've had a chance to refer to that, my question is whether you feel that the requirements and schedules in that section are reasonable and things that can be done, or are there things that you anticipate there being a problem in complying with?
Mr. President, Councilman Miller, I think that we could handle that more appropriately through some kind of, like I said, an ancillary subsidiary reporting. I think the structure and the complexity and the limitations of the current system that's used contributes to that delinquency, but I would prefer that we at least get something out on a timely basis. I'm used to monthly reports to any legislative body I reported to. You're not looking for audited financial statements, but you're looking for management tools. Those have to be accurate and produced timely. I think we can extract the information we need, make some of the accounting changes from a technical standpoint to make the information, to make it presented a little better in a more understandable format that people can digest without continuing follow-ups. I think the staff do a good job here, but they're kind of burdened into the process as it exists. I think we can change that process, satisfy the reporting requirements, and then ultimately maybe roll up to more sophisticated quarterly analysis. But I don't see any problem issuing monthly reports.
Okay, and I will have more questions, but I'll wait for the next round.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Greenspan, and then Councilwoman Simon.
Great, thank you. The Mr. Miller was sitting on a very touchy point for a number of us. I'd say all of us, as it relates to financial reporting. There are, pursuant to the code to 701, about 15 reports that we're delinquent in receiving from January 1 until now, based on the code that was adopted by council. So obviously it's frustrating from our perspective because it's been challenging for us to be able to gauge the financial operations and candidly the operational operations of the county without having that. So it's important that we receive that, but more importantly that the administration understands the financial condition of the county. And I would say it would be a priority of us to have 701 complied with. And I don't believe it's been purposefully ignored, but understanding the challenges that the two different competing systems have with one another, with Brass and Famous, there still is an opportunity to provide ad hoc reporting to meet the obligations. With that said, I'm glad that you stated that it's a priority of yours. Monthly reporting would be great, but you're starting behind the eight ball in the sense that we're already deficient in over a dozen reports. So I'm glad to see that you're going to make that a priority. I had to state that because it was important. It was a question I was going to ask, but it's important that we understand that. So a question has to do with bond rating agencies and bonding. What's been your experience insofar as representing a political subdivision before bond rating agencies and going to the market with the issuance of bonds?
Mr. President, Councilman Greenspan, my experience with that directly with the bonding agencies was limited to a small issue that I did in Beechwood years ago. Everywhere I've been since in Solon we did refund some bonds. That did not require any kind of appearance before the rating agencies. I have pretty extensive experience with issuing notes. I'm familiar with the rating process. In contact with the rating agencies, filing all the necessary reports on a regular basis. But as far as perhaps like going to New York and making presentations or coordinating a presentation here, I would have to say no, I haven't been exposed to that.
Okay. And my second question, my first was more of a statement, so I apologize. As far as the organizational chart of, well, I'll just refer to it as the finance world, there's currently an open position for a finance director. Is it your understanding that you would report into the finance director, or would you report into the executive as the charter states, And then follow on, where do you see the role of the treasurer reporting into the fiscal officer, the finance director, or the executive?
Mr. President, Mr. Greenspan, I do not have any information on what the organizational structure is purported to be, or I know there's been changes contemplated. I can give you my perspective on my 2-week experience here. I think the treasurer, there has to be some separation between the treasurer and the fiscal officer. I'm assuming that that position will continue to report directly to the executive. As far as looking at the functions within the fiscal office and those levels of responsibility, there might be a couple of things that we would want to reposition, but honestly, I haven't had the opportunity. I have not even, because of some other commitments that have been coming up over the past 2 weeks, I really have spent no time with the people in the recorder's office. I'm sure they're wonderful people. I've spent a real limited amount of time with the auto title department. So I really need to get in a little deeper there. I do think that there's an important component of this job, excuse me, that's on paper that maybe is kind of overlooked because of its relevance to the charter, but somebody needs to really run the day-to-day operations of all these departments, all these offices. That's a full-time job, keeping on top of that, coordinating programs like the AP implementation. I'm not sure if there is a place for either a position over the fiscal officer or in a different direction that handles more of the upper level, meetings or analytics. But at least my view of it, which is going to be part of my commitment, is somebody needs to run the day-to-day operations of the office as well.
So if I can just follow on with that. So are you saying that your role as fiscal officer is not to assist in the management and oversight of the day-to-day operations?
Mr. President, Mr. Greenspan, no, I guess I was misunderstood. I think it's a bigger component than what I had originally identified maybe as the responsibility of the fiscal officer.
And just one, so I'm clear, it's your understanding when you had your preliminary conversations and your advanced conversations with the executive that your role is that you would report into the executive directly. Is that
correct? That's
correct. So not the finance director.
No, I was aware that there was a position posted, but for the time being, at least I haven't been getting any indication of the reporting lines to have been changed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Greenspan. Councilwoman Simon.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, and congratulations, Mr. Kennedy, on the nomination. I'm very proud to have you before us. You're very competent and experienced and will bring a wealth of knowledge to the position. Specifically, however, I wanted to know whether you have any ideas or initiatives that would help dog owners getting their dog licensing renewed, or because last fall we had an issue with multiple dog license applications going out to dog stewards instead of owners. Yeah.
Councilman Simon, I did read those both media reports and some internal documents. I think that particular instance, even extracted from that situation, was perhaps evidence of weak quality controls or internal controls, that nobody proofed the information that was going out, that there's not an appropriate checks and balance. I mean, you can hire an outside contractor to do certain things, but you can never make the assumption that they're going to carry out their duties 100%. I think maybe in the longer run, we need to look at other opportunities to make it easier for people to have access. I know there's remote locations, there's online registration, but I'd like the opportunity to look at some other situations that we could get probably a wider net so people have more of an opportunity to do that and use those forums. I'm a big believer, having been on the other side, that all these municipal governments throughout the county we don't call on them to help the county. We can probably make use of some of those people, their forums, their facilities. I know from like a budget standpoint, there are things that I would like to change internally to how the county runs the budget commission based on my experience from the other side coming in. I think we can make that more sophisticated, but to your point, maybe use some of those communities to help us get the message out and perhaps have an avenue or a vehicle for people. One more way to make it easier for them to register.
As a follow-up to that, I don't know if you're aware, the dog kennel right now has a campaign of getting people to get their dog licenses. It's wanted, and there's actually billboards and posters, and they're doing a really great job. And I'm wondering if you would object to giving them more responsibility at the kennel proper to work on this issue, because they're really the central place. And for so long, there's been this schism between this outside fiscal office trying to operate when the kennel itself is really the central place where people usually go to get this done. So would you have an objection to allowing them to have more responsibility on collecting dog license fees and actually working on getting those sold?
Mr. President, Councilwoman Simon, no, I would not have any objection. The people that are interested and have a direct relevance to that particular type, I would. Obviously, we'd have to look at controls and that type of thing, but I would have no reservations whatsoever.
Councilman, thank you, Councilwoman Jones, and then Councilwoman Conwell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, congratulations, Mr. Kennedy, on going through to this point of the process. Our county has just recently completed a disparity study, and we have studied racial disparity within county contracting and the procurement process. Disparity was found, and 17 recommendations have been given to move the needle in a better direction. Those study results and recommendations will move through the Office of Procurement and Diversity that is under your fiscal department. Can you share with me what maybe experiences you might have had in your past in diversity, and what thoughts you have as far as addressing the procurement and contracting disparities we have at the county?
Mr. President, Councilman Jones, I did have extensive experience in both my stints at the Lottery Commission. The state has a very aggressive, what's called an MBE program there. We were required at the lottery to dedicate 15% of our contracts to the state MBE program. We did that very successfully. It was integrated into not only our RFP process, but our actual day-to-day purchasing process. The real solution and the Cliff Notes is to get people to go out and actually understand the significance of what they're doing and make a proactive attempt to try and communicate that to get vendors that are going to be in compliance with the recommendations of the program. I mean, there are people out there, I think a lot of times it's just too convenient to take the status quo, to not extend any kind of additional effort. So I think a big part of the success of that is not only the physical recommendations, it's getting people to carry them out to make sure that the message from management and leadership is that that's one of our goals and objectives, is to do so and to give people all the right tools to get there. We did run for the state 2 or 3 times a year. We would have symposiums or fairs or whatever to kind of bring the state agencies in line with the vendors. A lot of times vendors didn't know what agencies had available in their budgets or what they actually did with their monies. And likewise, a lot of agencies did not know that there are vendors, in this case throughout the county, but there are vendors out there that maybe they're just not aware of. So that's something that I would recommend that we look into as well.
I know it's been a very short 2 weeks. Have you as of yet had an opportunity to talk to Office of Procurement and Diversity, OPD, about the study or the procurement practices that need to be implemented?
Mr. President, Mr. Jones, I have not talked to them specifically about the disparity study. I did read some reports. I think we have to look at not only as part of that some improvements to processing in purchasing and procurement, just not to maybe affect a little more reasonable timeline to get things done, so that we're not running into various compliance issues with the auditors in terms of contracts being late and that sort of thing. So that's another priority, but I plan on having those discussions if I have a couple more weeks to do so.
All right, thank you.
Councilwoman Conwell.
Congratulations so far, Mr. Kennedy. Currently, the Director of Office of Budget and Management reports to the Fiscal Officer. The Director's position is currently posted since Director Chris Murray has been nominated for Treasurer. What qualities would you look for in a new Director?
Mr. President, Councilwoman Conwell, I think we're torn. I'm torn, only haven't been here a couple of weeks, from somebody who's going to have an intricate knowledge of how those systems operate. We're kind of on the hook with these systems until this ERP program at least gets a little more robust in its development. I think ideally you want somebody that understands government. One of the things that I think it's important to impart to the fiscal staff is the difference between accounting and budgeting. I think those two things get confused sometimes. You know, accounting, you're reporting on what's happened, budgeting, you're measuring on what's been done. Sometimes those two theories get mixed up. And I would hope that, I know Chris has done a great job. Chris has told me a lot and taught me a lot over the last 2 weeks. And I think he's going to be hard to replace. I would hope he still have some kind of level of involvement. He's a vast wealth of institutional knowledge. But I think somebody needs to understand government funds, government accounting, and has a real positive future outlook for what to do with the department and how it's going to integrate into the ERP, some other things that come down the line. I'd also at some point like to have some time to look at, we have a pretty big accounting department. There may be an opportunity to merge some of those functions or cross-train some of those functions. A lot of things in government are cyclical, and you hear about staff shortages and overwork and all these particular things in the times when things are crunched, but you don't hear anything about the other times. We need to kind of lay out a calendar and see if we can move some resources around, and give people opportunities to help other people get over the hump in certain situations. But I hope I can get someone as knowledgeable as Chris, with a lot of desire.
Do you, and you touched on a point, Mr. Kennedy, about the shortage in the Office of Budget and Management. There is a shortage, I believe, with analysts and things of that nature, so that would be very prudent to maybe possibly hire. And if you do plan on hiring, if you can't do the cross-training, because we are going through a pay equity situation right now, and people are overworked and underpaid, so to speak. So if you could work into something like that, but if you do think that after you do your investigation, that you would need to hire more staff, if you could let Council President Brady know right away, so when we start to look at the budget, we can incorporate those thoughts. So I just wanted to mention, point out that perspective. But on your personal, my next question would be on your personal licensure. I see that it ends on December 31st, 2015. Just curious, what is the procedure to renew your CPA, and how long does it take?
Mr. President, Councilwoman Conwell, I'm on a 3-year renewal. You have to satisfy continuing education requirements, file those papers with the Board of Accountancy, and you pay the money, obviously, and you get your license renewed for another 3 years.
Okay, so in December when it ends, I'm assuming that you're currently taking up your CEU classes and things of that nature too.
Yes, I'm about halfway done. It's 120 hours over 3 years, and I'm at about 100 hours so far.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Going to go back to Councilman Schron.
Thank you, Mr. President. You indicated you were down at the auditor's office and going over the reports and the results of the 2013 audit, and the 2014 probably is not going to have a lot of beautiful pearls on it either, I don't think. Do you have a target in mind, looking at the number of deficiencies that we had and expecting that probably 2014 is going to have the same number of deficiencies or pretty high level? When you look at that as a business planning person, what is your target as to when you're going to wipe out those deficiencies? Can you set a goal and a projection and a target?
Mr. President, Councilman Schron, I think we need to kind of put these things in silos. There's material citations, there's material noncompliance and material weaknesses, there's management letter items. Obviously, I would focus the energies on the most severe and substantial. I think the problem, because of some of it, because of some of the systems, these comments are not going to go away this year for 14 and probably for 15 as well, just because of the way the systems operate and their inability to communicate with each other. But some of the material citations, I know there's a large reconciliation that has to be completed. I would think that we would be able to trim this list down to about half the items by the end of this year, hopefully. It takes some help with our internal audit department and with our current staff. Again, that's something I don't look at auditors as adversaries. They're paid consultants to tell you where you're about to step on a hand grenade or a landmine. I've had good relationships with them, plan on continuing that here. I think if we work together with the staff here and communicate to the staff and tell them the importance of getting these things fixed, that we could probably get half of these out of the way by the end of the year. Some of them, I'm going to be honest though, they're going to be around for a year or two just because of the way things are presently.
Yeah, I think when we had a report that it was that probably the earliest we could see them wiped out would be 2016, because you're already in the queue for this year.
Correct.
And some of those deficiencies are going to show up irrespective of whatever your objective and goals are, because we already have the deficiency probably through the first portion of the year before you even take office. So I think it'll be a challenge to even get your half done this year, only because a lot of them are already in the movement. Your other point that you made in your opening comments were that you were looking at major changes, and I think you alluded to those having some cost savings. As you sit there and look at it from having run your background, is you've indicated you've been the financial director for 3 major areas, 3 other cities within our 59 communities. What do you see as the low-hanging fruit that are the major changes that you can pick out right this moment?
Mr. President, Councilman Schron, I'd be hard-pressed to identify something in particular. I think, like I said, you're looking at efficiencies that you can gain with the implementation of the ERP system. I don't know enough about some of the other areas to really tell you that I could affect some kind of reasonable improvement or efficiency or reduction in cost. I just don't know yet. But I think operationally, as I mentioned a few minutes earlier, there's some possibilities about combining functions or departments, making it more of a on-the-move type workforce that we can address, move them around, address concerns, address calendar crunches. But the biggest thing is to get rid of those old antiquated systems. They have huge maintenance contracts. Those are all going to go away. I think it'll be key to negotiate how you negotiate the contract with should you move forward with a provider for the ERP system. But you're going to get rid of all those old maintenance costs, all those old communication costs. but I'd like some more time to be able, I'm not sure I could identify low-hanging fruit today.
Well, I was just lifting from your opening comments where you used the words major changes. And so I wrote them down and was hoping to hear those. If you just do one, I would be thrilled if you get the ERP system up and running, because that will have, I think, astronomical impact as far as all the way through from every aspect of how we run this county as a business. And so if you were to take on not major changes, but major change, I would be thrilled with that.
Agreed.
We're going to go to Councilman Gallagher now.
Problem. Welcome, sir. Just recently, there was a concern raised about the position of the county financially going forward. And I know from the council side, we found it somewhat interesting. I was wondering if you also found it interesting, and if you have found it interesting, what have you done in the past 2 weeks to satisfy those interests?
Mr. President, Councilman Gallagher, as I said earlier, haven't had a chance to kind of recompute everything myself. Again, from a 2-week basis, not seeing, from my standpoint, I'm more comfortable looking at information that I put together as opposed to information somebody puts together for me, because there's a lot of assumptions in those materials. There's a lot of history in those materials that maybe I'm not familiar with to make a decision. As I said earlier, right now, I think the county's in good financial shape in the short term, but depending on what the commitments, the level of commitments are for the executive and for the council, that's probably going to determine, as it does with any community, based on your debt capacity and what your revenue streams are going to be. I think long term, we'll have to sit down and take a hard look at that.
I would imagine walking into a job that you're walking into, that would have piqued your interest to a red flag level.
I'm not sure that that was the first priority that I had coming in. I mean, I was still trying to get a handle on what other departments were there. I did get some information put together for that. I did attend a committee hearing last week. But as I said, I have not had the opportunity to get, and quite honestly, I don't have the expertise in those financial systems, at least not yet, to go in and extract the information or to see how the information's put in. I like to be sure myself before I tell somebody else what I think, and I haven't had that opportunity, honestly.
I can appreciate that, but like Mr. Schron said, you're talking about making some changes in a short 2-week period, and something like that to me would certainly sideline any changes until I got to the bottom of it. Thank you.
We're going to go to Councilman Hairston now.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just like to agree with Councilman Gallagher. If it were I, that would be one of the first things that I do, is to really get to the bottom of that, at least to have a keen understanding about what's going on. But aside from that, I remember back in 2012, the Plain Dealer published an article at Cleveland.com about the decrease in property valuations here in the county, which resulted in a reappraisal that happened then. You know that we're coming up this summer on an update on those property value appraisals, and with hopefully will result in a positive for us. You know that can be a great deal of work. Folks will be responding, contacting what's going on. So I will hope that, or can you tell me what steps do you believe that you should start making now that will help make that process a smooth process, seeing that the summer is approaching us in the next few months? You also talked about some changes you like to see before the ERP system can be fully administered. Just talk to me a little bit about those changes that you think you may want to do, or that think you can do before that is done.
Mr. President, Councilman Hairston, as far as the triennial update, I did have one meeting with the folks that are actually assigned to a task force or a project team that are doing that. They're already underway. They've communicated some preliminary information to the state. As I said in my remarks, my goal is to get a thorough understanding of the methodology, the statistical compilations that are done as part of that project, because I'm aware, especially having been not only where I live, but places that I work from a city standpoint, I know what the impact of that is.
So you know it's important.
I know it's very important. And I also know that our office will deal with complaints, and there's going to be complaints. There's just no way around it. But I want to make sure that, you know, when, pretty basic, but when you have two houses next to each other, that there's a reason that there's a difference in the valuation of one house to the next, or that, and there's all different kinds of statistical strategies that they use, and they, you know, kind of coordinate homes and businesses and neighborhoods and that sort of thing. But you are going to have a situation where the person on this side of the street goes up and the person on the other side of the street goes down. We have to kind of mitigate those opportunities. You're not going to completely eliminate them, but I want a thorough understanding of the logic involved in, you know, I want to make sure that the folks that are doing the job are doing their homework, then that we can survive the test. As far as other major changes with the ERP, I think I was just alluding to some of these things, that we can merge some of these areas of responsibilities into into more centralized functions, as opposed to having separate departments for each separate thing. But again, I'm 2 weeks in, so I'm not sure I'm the person that's going to give you the total information right now.
Understood. I appreciate the answer and I accept it. So as you begin to, you know, I'm new here also. I've been here for about a little over a year now. So I'd like to, you know, once you come up with your recommendations about what we can do in the interim, I would like to see that. I'm sure other council members would like to see that also, so you can forward that to us. I'd appreciate it.
I will. Thank you.
Councilman Greenspan has indicated he'd like to go a second round, and then we're going to go to Councilman Germana, and then we're going to go to Councilwoman Simon for a second round.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. The charter has a problem with it as it relates to the audit committee. And not only is it an item that this council put before the voters, which was unsuccessful, there was some, I believe, probably some confusion in how it was written, and I believe there's some confusion with those who opposed it. Understand the complexity and the seriousness of how our charter has this flaw. It has to do with the composition of the audit committee, and I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the charter, but the composition, the composition of the audit committee. It's not only a recommendation or suggestion from this body, but the state auditor has repeatedly provided comment that our charter has a problem, or our composition has a problem through. Right now, the chair of the audit committee would be yourself, which in conflict you'd be required to administer to yourself various rules, and the executive is also one of the 5 members of the committee. So you've got the CEO and the CFO as members of the committee, to which one is actually the chair. The CFO is the chair. Have you ever been engaged in an organization where the structure has been like that, whether it be the lottery, whether it be any of the 3 cities or any other organization?
No, Mr. President, Councilman Greenspan, no, I have not. The audit committee at the City of Sullivan is set by charter, and it's I believe the chairman of the finance committee, the council person, was the lead. There was 3 appointees from, I think 2 by the mayor, 1 by council, or vice versa, but nothing, or in any other city or over the state, where the person that's responsible for the production of the statements is also the head of the committee. No.
Right, and so you see.
I agree with you.
You see the conflict as well.
Yes.
All right. We may. I hope we haven't even talked about this, but the next time that we go to the ballot, we put this item back on. But in the interim, how do you plan on operating within the current confines to appear to be as independent as possible? Understand that there's a conflict. The charter's wrong. There's a conflict. How do you plan on working in that environment?
Mr. President, Councilman Greenspan, I do believe there's also a vacancy on that audit committee, so we should probably work towards getting some community member to participate, so at least you have quorums for meetings. That's first thing. But probably we would have to discuss kind of the rules of engagement and who's responsible for what aspect of the committee's responsibilities, only because I think I would be uncomfortable and probably irresponsible in taking control of the committee or dictating how the committee ran. I share your thoughts on that.
Right, and I'm not even sure, pursuant to the charter, the audit committee is supposed to meet at least quarterly. I'm not even sure of the schedule of the meetings of the audit committee as they've over the last 4 years, which is a challenge in itself. So it's something I'm glad you're aware of it. It's something that we are going to need to work through at least for the next 3 years. The next time, I don't know when the chairman of the committee believes we might put things on the ballot, but you're looking at if we wait till 16, implementation won't be till 17. So we're looking at a while to deal with this issue. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Germano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kennedy, let me just say that I was very impressed with your presentation, and I really don't have a question, but I just wanted to have some input. I think the fact that you've worked with councils in these cities is a great strength, because the tenure of all these years where these people under different silos, just reported to their boss, and then 3 county commissioners. I think the great surprise of the new government was that this council is active and looks at everything. That's what I hear from the public, because they never knew that we're going to be so involved in this. And I think that's going to be a great strength, because you're used to the culture of reporting to finance committees and so on, and passing budgets by the local governments. And so in a certain respect, sometimes we've had some disappointments in getting the information. So I think that's going to be a great strength of yours. So I look forward to voting for your confirmation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilman Germano. Interesting point. We're going to go back to Councilwoman Simon and then back to Councilman Miller.
Thank you. I'll be brief. We talked briefly, Mr. Kennedy, about the sextennial appraisal process that we just came off of a couple years ago, and I don't think you've had time to look at the methodology used in implementing the appraisal. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, so I'm wondering if you could get back to me or us about that process and how you will do things next time, if it would be different or the same, and if that methodology was, I guess, the one that was most useful in the process.
Absolutely.
Councilman Miller.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask some additional questions about the audit findings, but they're almost the same as what Councilman Schron asked, so I will move on from that. But I just wanted to comment a little bit about the monthly reports. The council's legislation provides a process of monthly reports to be given 15 days after the end of each month, and these reports don't prescribe any particular schedules or specific data, but rather give you the opportunity to provide a brief narrative about any kinds of changes, trends, things happening either in receipts or expenditures or anything that we might be aware of as emerging trends that could be affecting us pending the next more detailed quarterly report. So I just want to encourage you to take advantage and fully use that process and use that as an opportunity to kind of take advantage of your ability to feel and see all the numbers as they're coming in. So I just encourage you to make use of that process.
Well, Mr. President, Mr. Miller, that's kind of what I'm used to doing. Any of the councils I reported to, I gave monthly reports, a fund cash report, revenue report, expense report, payroll reports, and gave them kind of like a narrative summary. I always want to give everybody all the information. I'll give you as much detail as you want, but I think it's important to point out a few things that are out of the norm, good or bad, or that reference where we're at any particular point in the year to what we purported to propose in terms of the budget and that sort of thing. So that's what I would envision, given monthly summaries, brief narratives, don't want to complicate, don't want to get into the minutia, but to come up with reports that are more structured. To me, the kind of like to what the city reporting is, that the county has really been set up like a huge municipal government. There's no reason we can't extract the same principles used in all the financial reporting I'm used to and give it to not only the administration, but to the council on a more timely basis.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kennedy, second thing is I just want to say that that I share, and I think my colleagues share, the commitment to the importance of the ERP project. We made some tough decisions and pared some things back as to what we went forward with in the December bond issue, but the ERP project was one that we included because of its potential to help our operations in so many ways. So I just wanted to say that, and other than that, I look forward to working with you. I'm prepared to support your nomination and wish you the best of success.
Thank you, sir.
Any further questions by the council? Councilman Schron.
You've worked in 3 different communities, and have you used some of the other tools for collection and fundraising and fund activities within the communities, such as the credit card? Because I know we use it on a very limited basis here, and it seems to me it's a tool that's become very modern in every way, shape, or form.
Mr. President, Councilman Schrein, are you talking about in terms of collecting revenue or
primary collecting revenue? Yeah, helps in the bad debt. I don't know if any of these other 3 communities you used it for any other purpose.
All of them, sir.
Okay.
Both and on the expense side too. I mean, there's
pay your bills with it, I assume. Yeah.
Yes.
In a very big way. Well, I would encourage you to look at being more creative than what we have right now.
It's not only credit cards, but electronic check processing, ACH.
Yeah, I want to see the new technologies being used. I'd like to. And this is more just curiosity. The executive director position went to the vice president position in your career with the lottery. It just seems to me the executive director is usually a higher position. Is that way it is in the nomenclature here?
No, Mr. Schrein, I think you're right. I left the lottery and took a position as vice president in a company called, I think it was called the Lottery Corporation.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you very much, because I didn't pick up on that. Thank you very much for pointing that out.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, I really was impressed with how candid you've been and thoughtful in your answers to the questions. I had wondered, if you, I knew that you would, as you began to look around, realize, all these functions that were under the former county auditor and a few more as well. It's a vast, complex administrative position, and you're right. Sometimes you hear fiscal officer, you don't think of it that way. So it is a very big job, and I have an interest in the old Weights and Measures Department, now called the Consumer Affairs Department, but I'd like to sit down and talk to you about that on the side. I don't expect you to have, in 2 weeks, have gotten down the list to that point yet. But you have.
Not
Okay, all right.
very
Well, we'll talk.
sophisticated, but thank you.
We'll talk. I look forward to that. Is there any unreadiness to move this confirmation forward? Okay, well, hearing none. Good. Would anybody like to make a motion to recommend Resolution 2015-0058 to the full council?
So move.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? This will be on the council's April 28th agenda.
Thank you very much for the
Thank you.
time. Thank you.
The council is going to take a 5-minute, more or less, break before we begin again.